In today's day and age, it's particularly difficult to ignore the massive impact that superhero fiction has had over our popular culture all around the world. Despite their iconography being used and exploited since pretty much their inception, the success of film studios such as Disney, and perhaps to a lesser extent Warner Bros. And Sony, has opened up the narrative surrounding superhero characters to a greater audience than ever before. This may be very well due to the quality of the most prominent works to which these characters are attached, and perhaps in a world in which these characters' only existence was limited to recyclable and supersaturated products, their impact on our lives would have been minimal. But the truth is, some of these characters have been with us for the better part of a century, and trying to reduce their impact to just one factory-made representation of their legacy would do a disservice to the hundreds of authors and artists that have worked on these characters. In fact, we could go even further and claim that these characters go beyond the whims of any given author at any given time. Their stories, their narratives, their pathos, their ideologies, all intertwine in a legacy greater than any given interpretation of the character that today has more resemblances to classical mythology than most people would even realize. Superheroes then can be viewed as the modern mythology, not only because they entice us with stories of supermen and women that enjoy gifts akin to the abilities of God, but because they teach us lessons on life, death, family, crime, punishment, all the likes. And the purpose of these lessons will, of course, vary greatly depending on the culture which produces these narratives. As many of you may be aware of, the bulk of these superheroes comes from the United States of America. As such, the majority of the lessons being taught in these narratives will reflect or condemn the cultural sensibilities and ideologies of the people of this nation, as well as their views on governance and economy. Mythology, hence, is a tool to teach whoever serves as a vessel for their messaging about politics. Now, amongst the ever-expanding pantheon of superheroes produced in the United States, the most prominent exponents of the ideals of the American hero and its ideology are none other than the pairing of Superman and Batman. Both of these characters, almost as old as the subgenre itself, have remained some of pop culture's most relevant icons, and their branding not only brings millions of dollars, but have also become aspiring symbols of morality and decency. Between the two, I decided to focus on the figure of the Batman, because Batman has always seemed to be more accurate, honest, and in some extent, grounded representation of core values in American society. These values being family, justice, wealth, authority, patriarchy, and punishment. Now, for further context, we ought to briefly talk about comic books' relationship with politics. The truth is, comic books are one of the most overtly political media that have ever been put into print. Early icons of the genre, including the original Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and the likes, existed as a vessel to transmit messages of empowerment and hope during Depression-era America. Afterwards, these icons would be followed by the likes of Captain America and the X-Men, all of which were the key in propagandistic machinery of the United States against the Axis power during the World War II.
Comic books have always been political, and have taken stands on controversial issues such as the death penalty, abortion, gay rights, and the environment. They have also reflected the mood of the public by being pro-war during wartime and pacifistic during peacetime, almost as often as they have served as the voice of the minority opinion, crying for peace during wartime and advocating going to war when the public is reluctant to do so.
From that point on, superheroes were forever attached to the roots of American ideology and defenders of the core values of its nation. Before delving into Batman proper, we first must understand the core principle that makes us see superheroes not just as fictional entities, but as a myth in the making which serves as a catalyst to political messages and ideals. For that, it would be a disservice not to mention Joseph Campbell's monomyth as the basis of this statement. What exactly is the monomyth? The basic notion is that the structure of the hero narrative, more commonly referred to the hero's journey, all throughout different mythologies of the world, repeat itself in a tight and organized wheel which always follows the same structure. In said structure, a hero embarks in an epic journey or quest which will forever change him so that he can change something back at his or her place of origin. In that regard, figures such as Heracles, Achilles, Beowulf, Buddha and the likes all share the same journey as to become the hero of their tales.
This is what Joyce called the monomyth, an archetypical story that springs from the collective unconscious. Its motives can appear not only in myth and literature, but, if you are sensitive to it, in the working out of the plot of your own life. The basic story of the hero journey involves giving up where you are, going into the realm of the adventure, coming to some kind of symbolically rendered realization, and then returning to the field of normal life.
We can already link this principle to our own superhero fiction, but what deepens the bond between the superhero and America is the notion of the American monomyth. As Lang and Trimble stated under Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, an examination of the American monomyth and the comic book superhero, the classic notions of the monomyth started to get secularized in America while still retaining Judeo-Christian values at their core. The heroes are made into selfless individuals that, despite having the power of the gods at their disposal, they still decide that the best course of action is to help those in need rather than themselves, which further separates this newly founded notion of the hero from the classical one. The American hero is also heavily attached to the ideals of the American dream and the still relevant notion that in America everyone can be their better self and achieve all of their potential along all the fame, power, and money that they rightfully deserve. Batman is, of course, no exception to this, and the character has been always attached to core values and views of the American population as both a selfless protector and a savior to humankind, even if he is to a lesser extent than his fictional peers. But Batman does not limit himself to be a savior. He is also the judge, jury, and executioner of most of the stories he stars in. Batman itself can be studied as a figurehead in the context of how USA society approaches certain issues, such as wealth, poverty, crime, punishment, trauma, and authoritarianism. In fact, I could go as far as to say that these concepts stand among the main core ideals of the character, and the lessons he teaches us throughout his adventures more often than not make a stance on a combination of these concepts. For example, Paul's Dini War on Crime talks of how crime is a disease that spreads in both the lower and high strata of society, without really delving into the reason as to why poverty might be a necessity to some and is instead treated as a moral failing. In The Dark Knight Returns, Batman is faced with a society that has given up on trying to fix the world, and instead has to go back into action in order to fix things his way outside of any establishment. Lowe's Long Halloween delves into the ideals of family, and how the loss of one's loved one can lead to a path of darkness that ultimately leads to good thanks to love. If I were to reduce the main theme of the Batman overall mythos, is that moral failings are usually presented as the cause of the evils in society, instead of those evils being due to the systems put into place by personalities in power in order to exploit the lower class.
The woman behind the counter is a hardened criminal. I've handed her over to the police several times before. I'll probably do it again. Like many, she returns from confinement determined to maintain a quiet, low-profile existence. She tries very hard to fit in, working a simple job, forcing away any thoughts of her criminal past. I sense she doesn't know how to live this way. The crushing drudgery of her self-inflicted routine will soon send her back into past habits and the influence of old friends.
Batman is the good billionaire, in opposition to Lex Luthor. Batman only beats bad criminals, instead of focusing on a discussion as to why crime is as necessity as the true moral weight of having to rob in order to feed yourself or your family. To put it bluntly, Batman is a perfect representation of the ideals of a good American and the precept of capitalism. Now, this doesn't mean that the figure of the Batman hasn't been used to criticize the United States politics. Far from it. Most famously, Alan Grant's tenure as the writer in the main Batman magazine proved to be fairly progressive, putting Batman against moral dilemmas regarding his beliefs. Dennis O'Neil also did his fair share of contribution in comics, and also tried to depict a Batman more in tune with the lower classes. In recent times, writers such as C. Murphy and Raphael Grampa have also tried to offer a more progressive leftist view on Batman. But no matter the point of view these characters are defending or standing up, the main idea to be taken from this video is that these characters work perfectly as a replacement for the tales of the ancient gods and creatures. Their values go beyond any given writer and are instead themselves representation of ideals, values, and moral goods and failings. It is paramount to consider both the influence society has in them as well as the influence they have on the readers.